Hey everyone! Before we open today's file, please make sure to follow us on Instagram at d.s.radio, where you can find all the images that go along with today's case. You can drop us an email at contact.dsradio@gmail.com. You can find all of our socials in the Linktree bio on our Instagram profile, including links to merch. If you're feeling especially generous, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio, where you can get access to our exclusive Instagram page and make suggestions for upcoming episode topics that you would like us to cover. Speaking of Patreon, thanks to our Patreons, Riff Cult, Cropley Crab, Cash Broadus, Raspberry Jr., Jason R. Nelson, Creepy Paper, Jamie Sook, Michael Laughlin, Lindsay Keller, Mike Wright, Greer Weaver, Kelsey Carruthers, Linz Gibbon, Drake Holvig, Only Child, Michael M, Wesley Akers, Riaz K, Emily Medeiros, Pip, Heather Wynn, Graves, Devon Sweatshirt, The Ordained Sinister Minister, and Philip Hoffman.
Hello everybody and welcome to Dystopian Simulation Radio. My name's Chris.
And I'm Linz.
And we are your hosts on this journey into the unknown. Ooh. How you doing, Linz?
Good, I just had some cake.
How was it?
Well, you got me it for my birthday.
I did.
I tried to leave the room and Chris was like, just sit down. And I went to stand up and he was like, sit down. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And then he came back. I heard some rustling around and he came back with the cake. And it was, thank you, Chris. It was lovely. I made a nice wish, not going to share it. Salted caramel, though. Hell yeah.
I wish the cake would taste like salted caramel.
It did, didn't it?
Well, my wish came true.
Oh, you wished. I thought you said I wish. I was like, was that not what I was eating? Am I like...
You know, I bought lemon drizzle, so...
like, oh no, it's happening again. But yeah, I'm happy I've had cake, now I have coffee. And Chris is going to tell me some kind of weird and wonderful story.
I am. I'm very excited about this one. Mm-hmm. But a couple of things before we get into it. So firstly, as always, if you want to see the images, and trust me, you do want to see the images for this episode, you can follow our Instagram
at d.s.radio.
And if you're feeling especially generous, you can join us over on Patreon
at patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio. And we also have a tip jar. All links in the Instagram bio.
Yeah, they're in the Instagram bio in our link tree.
Yeah. Just click that link and you'll get links to everything that we've just mentioned if you've forgotten what we said already.
Exactly. So just before we get into it, I did actually see we had a lovely new review, which I thought was quite nice.
Ooh.
It was over on Apple Podcasts by Cop's Wifey.
Cop's Wifey.
And it says, I absolutely love Linz and Chris and their crazy yet endearing and always interesting podcast. I never know what to expect, but I'm never disappointed. The hosts jive so well together and make any topic supremely interesting. Side note, I love the name Dystopian Simulation Radio. I'm on the edge of my seat waiting for the next episode.
That's really lovely. Thank you so much. What was it?
Cop's Wifey.
Cop's Wifey.
If you're
listening,
love
you.
Yeah, we love you.
What did she call us? Crazy or weird and endearing?
Crazy yet endearing and always interesting.
Oh, I like to be crazy and endearing. Oh, I love that review. Thank you so much. If you want to give us a review as well and 5 stars, like that would help us out so much.
It really does.
Yeah, and we'll read it out and comment on how lovely it is. Make sure it's lovely.
Yeah, if you don't want to review us 5 stars, don't review us.
Yeah, don't bother. What's wrong with you people?
It'd be like 1,000 people now, like 4.99 stars. Okay, so Linz, today we're going straight to The Wild Wild West.
We're going straight to the
Wild
Wild Wild West.
So this came from one of our listeners. This came from Jonathan Zabrinsky, who...
What a name.
Yeah.
Nice.
Who let me know about a very interesting pair of shoes. Now, I know what you're thinking. Is this interesting pair of shoes really the basis of a good story? Well...
I'm assuming so, because here we are.
Just wait until you've heard the story of Big Nose George.
Excuse me? Is that like a bonus Slipknot member?
Chapter 1. The Bandit. So let's set the scene for anyone who hasn't played Red Dead Redemption. It's the late 1800s and the USA is rapidly modernizing as the government creeps westward. But the lawless nature of the West still prevails. Our story does not begin in the West, however. It begins in the East. So far east of Wyoming that actually it's in Europe. So George was born in Montpellier, France in 1834. And how he actually made his way the 5,066 miles east is a mystery, but regardless, this is where the story takes us. So Linz, let's address the name. What do you think a man named Big Nose George might look like?
Well, I'm picturing George Harrison with a very large nose. And I can't imagine anything else. Big Nose George, yeah. Maybe a bit of a hench fella.
Hench.
A bit of a hench fella.
Okay. Well, take a look at his Tinder profile here and let me know what you think.
Excuse me?
I think that was a thing back then.
Big Nose George. I guess he has a bigger than average nose.
He does.
Yeah. It's not really George Harrison, but he does have a big mustache, like a big fuzzy caterpillar.
Yeah, that's the word.
2-inch thick, big fuzzy caterpillar mustache. Bare chin. So not a bare chin, like a clean,
a naked chin.
Clean shaven chin. Big fuzzy mustache. And I like his eyebrows.
They're pencily, aren't they?
Yeah, pencily and a bit wiggly. It looks like a nice man to me. But who am I? I think I'm a good judge of character, but I'm guessing because we're talking about him that Big Nose George didn't do anything good.
Well, as the name implies, he does have a rather large nose. Yeah. It's a schnoz bigger than Triple H's.
It's got character. I like it, though.
It is. But if you had to guess this man's real last name, what would it be?
Okay. I'm going to say George Henrik.
Henrik?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a very French name.
Oh, shit, it's French. George Baptiste.
Good attempt. But actually, no. It's actually Parrot. Which led to his alternative nickname, Big Beak Parrot.
George Parrot.
Or Parrot, maybe?
Parrot, yeah. I don't think Parrot is a very French name either, Chris.
I'm going with Parrot.
George Parrot. Big Beak Parrot.
So,
gosh. Okay, this is great already.
So this French miscreant made his way stateside and joined a gang of highwaymen. Supposedly led by a man named Sim Jan, the outlaws were active in the Powder River County area of Wyoming, robbing pay wagons and stagecoaches of their cash shipments and relieving passengers of their money and their jewellery. The gang didn't seem to have an official name, so I'll just refer to them as the Jan Gang after their supposed leader.
It sounds like a weird disco techno band from the 90s.
Jan Gang.
Jan Gang.
Well, the Jan Gang was also comprised of Frank McKinney, Joe Manus, Jack Campbell, John Wells, Tom Reed, Frank Toll, and Dutch Charlie Barres. The gang decided that they needed a big score, and they targeted a Union Pacific train carrying passengers and unknown treasure. The gang deviously decided to tamper with the tracks, so the train would just simply derail itself, and they could just waltz on over and collect a mighty fine payday.
Wow.
Smart. The Jan Gang did their handiwork on the tracks.
Did they put a couple of pennies down?
Are you in the Jan Gang?
Yeah, I was like the
Only members know the secrets.
Yeah, I was a bonus member, but I just couldn't live with the guilt.
Well, they all did the tracks, and then they retreated to hide in some nearby vegetation, which I'm comically picturing as just a desert with one small bush.
And two eyes, like a bunch of eyes.
Now, as they waited, rather comically, an unexpected section crew trundled along and discovered the fault in the lines. Now, section crews are essentially maintenance teams specifically there to repair track faults. The one thing that could have gone wrong with this dastardly plan went wrong.
They should have done more of a stakeout, like Home Alone style. Just sit and watch.
Wet Bandit style.
See how often. Yeah, Wet Bandit style.
Quickly, the crew of outlaws got into an argument. Several wanted to kill the section crew, and others protested as they weren't just going to kill some men who were only doing their jobs. Divided, the gang had no option but to sit there and watch the crew repair the tracks. Trot along, just in time to get their lunch, and the 12:15 Union Pacific Express blow on by on a freshly repaired track. Unfortunately for the gang, they knew that the section crew would report and raise the word that the track had been tampered with, so they decided to go into hiding. Chapter 2. The Sin.
I like the sin.
And this story is so American, it actually hurts a little bit. So let me just
Can we get a yeehaw?
Let me just take another little sip of my tea here.
Jolly good.
That's much better. Now, I'm ready for this next sentence. The Jan Gang went into hiding in their hideout in Rattlesnake Canyon in the shadow of Elk Mountain. Do you want some of this tea?
Yes, please, old chap.
There you go.
I do. Tally-ho.
Now, the gang laid low, but out in the local area, a posse was being formed, including locals and law enforcement officers. Carbon County Sheriff Deputy Robert Widowfield and Union Pacific's own detective, Henry Vincent, tracked the gang to Rattlesnake Canyon. The GO thought that they were still tracking them, and they approached the hideout, but they soon realized that the ashes in the fire were still warm. Then the Jan Gang struck, ambushing the two lawmen, killing them dead. Widowfield was shot in the face, and Vincent was shot in the back, fleeing Rattlesnake Canyon.
That's what happens when you step foot in Rattlesnake Canyon.
Oh, yeah. I mean...
You get got.
You get got. The gang, though, had now committed an even bigger crime than the attempted train robbery. Bigger than all of their robberies, thieving, and con artistry. They'd just killed 2 U.S. law enforcement officers. The only way to survive was to split up, and the gang went their separate ways. A Union Pacific Railroad discovered the bodies and immediately offered a $10,000 reward for the gang, dead or alive.
Dead or alive.
Now, 10 grand is worth around $300,000.
Yeah, I was going to
in
say.
today's money.
That's more than you get now.
So these to say these men were wanted is not the half of it. It was even later doubled to $20,000. So Union Pacific were both rolling in money and also extremely interested in getting these guys to stop them.
I thought you were going to say extremely pissed off.
They were extremely pissed off. Now, the first of the 9 gang members to be eliminated was Frank Toll, who was killed during an unrelated stagecoach robbery in just the very next month.
Oh, he just went on and said,
He went
Let's
on,
do another.
joined a new crew and died on that job. Dutch Barres was the first to be apprehended the year after the murders, and he was being transported up to Rawlins for trial. Or rather, that was the plan. A mob stopped the train carrying Dutch in the town of Carbon County, the area of Carbon County, who entered onto the train, seized Dutch, and hanged him there and then from a nearby telephone pole.
Oh my gosh.
George and the other 7 gang members managed to escape the long arm of the law for now. Now, George had joined a new crew, and eventually a couple of the other gang members from the Jan gang reunited with him, and they were all in Morristown, Montana, and decided they needed to score one more time. They chose their target, which was a wealthy and well-known merchant called Morris Kahn. Kahn was extremely wealthy, and he owned loads of shops, loads of businesses, and really was the obvious target if you were going to be targeting him. Now, George and his compatriots conducted a literal daylight robbery when they targeted a convoy that Kahn had chartered to allow him to take money back east to purchase more stock for his business. George and co. waited for their moment. They wrapped bandanas around their faces and pounced on an area of land that was difficult to traverse, and gaps appeared in the convoy. They managed to surprise the soldiers protecting the convoy, and they were said to have made off eventually with between $3,600 and $14,000, depending on the accounts of the time. 2 deputies managed to arrest George after this in Miles City, Montana, and locked him away in jail with several of the gang members. While in jail, George dipped his schnoz in a few too many glasses of whiskey and began boasting about his exploits.
For God's sakes, George.
I know, you have one job.
Shut your beak.
Yeah. So he was boasting about these things, including the train robbery attempt and the murders. This was heard by the jailers, who sent word on the wire to Rawlins, and Sheriff Rankin was sent on a solo mission to bring that big-nosed bastard back.
Billy Big here's heard something on the grapevine.
So Rankin took possession of Big Nose and took him back on the train to Rawlins. Now, would you believe that very same mob that stopped the train carrying Dutch also stopped the train carrying George?
Oh, George.
Now, being French, George was naturally a coward.
Chris!
I kid. George did what anybody would have done in this situation with half a brain. And as he was being prepared for a lynching, he confessed that he took part in the murders, but if they let him live and face trial, he would give information to locate the remaining living gang members.
What a snitcho.
But the gang, or rather the mob, agreed.
Yellow belly.
Chapter 3. The Vigilantes. Arriving safely in Rawlins, Wyoming, Big Nose was put on trial, where he was both found guilty and provided no helpful information in locating the other Jan gang members. He was sentenced to death by hanging on the 2nd of April 1881. For unknown reasons, he was not killed quickly and was allowed to rot in jail for some time, and he had a lot of time to plot his escape, and in March of 1882, he assaulted his jailer, the very same man who brought him to justice on the train, Sheriff Robert Rankin. Big Nose leapt into action, and using his shackles, attacked Rankin and fractured his skull in the attack.
Jeez Louise.
George was free until he heard the cocking of the pistol's hammer, turned around, and Robert's wife, Rosa Rankin, was stood behind him with a gun. Quite easily, she managed to convince him to get back in the cell after that. So he was marched back into his cell, and George's escape plan was foiled. However, news of this soon reached the townfolk, that Big Nose George had tried to escape, and after lying to the mob that he would help identify the other members of the gang, and then this, another angry mob was found.
Mobs back then.
This used to be Rawlins' favourite activity, Friday night, form a mob. And this mob was very, very angry. The mob stormed the jail and decided to enact justice with no delay. The vigilantes donned masks and held poor Robert, still recovering from his head injury, and Rosa at gunpoint, demanding the jailhouse keys. They then accosted George from his cell and pulled him across the road to a nearby telegraph pole, where a crowd of around 200 formed to observe George becoming an ex-parrot.
Oh, George.
Hurling a noose over the pole, they then forced him to stand on a box and instructed George to jump. He did not.
Yeah, I was going to say, screw you.
So they kicked the box out from under him. Unfortunately, the rope was too long and he hit the ground. So then a ladder was found. They adjusted the length of the rope. They took him up the ladder, yeeted it out from under him. But George was one clever cat. He simply wrapped his arms and legs around the pole, shimmied up out of the way of any further ladder attacks, and refused to come down.
Yeah.
Now, seemingly as many things in George's life, this was quite comical and essentially left the mob shouting, "Jump, you bastard!"
Parrot style, baby.
Until... But at a certain point, his limbs could take no more. He lost his grip, and Big-Nosed George Parrot passed away in the world's most drawn-out lynching.
No, I don't want him to die.
Well, it's not the end of his story, I'll tell you
Thank
that.
God. Now, Chapter 5, Ghost Parrot.
Interestingly, I did find in my research that Wyoming only has 6 lynchings recorded in the state, and this story features 2 of them.
Ooh.
Chapter 4.
Ghost Parrot.
Chapter 4. The Doctor. Now, in the crowd watching the lynching, there were 2 men with very particular skills, who spotted an opportunity while George was cut down several hours later by the Undertaker. Not that one.
I was going to say, I was just waiting for the wrestling reference there. It's like, here we go.
Now, being French and unmarried, George had no kin in the country to take possession of his body. So these 2 men, Dr. Eugene Osborne, who attended the death at the request of the mob to pronounce the death officially, and Dr. Thomas McGee, both of them were Union Pacific Railroad physicians and surgeons, and they claimed the corpse for medical study. These Union Pacific Railroad, they've got their own sheriffs, they've got physicians.
Like enterprise, yeah. It's really weird.
There was money on those train tracks back in the day.
So I guess that's probably... Because when you think of like someone robbed a train, you kind of think like cargo train for some reason. But this has got like doctors, like passengers, stuff.
Yeah. Like
all nature of people. So yeah.
Well, I'm just spitballing here. I don't know exactly. So forgive me if I'm wrong here. But I imagine that obviously it's such a huge country and there was barely any, there was only telegraph and so on then. Mm-hmm. Like you needed people out there, if you were employing somebody, you were sending them out there, you needed to make sure that they stayed alive. It was probably easier and cheaper to employ a doctor to live in the region to take care of your employees, as opposed to recruiting new men out east and taking them west, for example.
Yeah, I guess people it takes a while to get somewhere on train, so I guess people are there on it for quite a while too. Yeah. Like, I never, when you think of these not highway robberies, but sort of like bandits coming out and robbing trains, you don't really, I don't know why, but I know they go on and they just give you jewellery, but you don't think it's probably as many people as there is on there.
No, it would have been a lot. And remember, this is the luxury travel of the day as well.
Mm-hmm. And how valuable is a doctor back then?
Oh, exactly. So this medical study started off with the goal of examining Parrot's brain to see if his brain differed at all from your average law-abiding, God-fearing American. And
like a Cesar Lombroso kind of early criminology kind of thing. Okay.
So they were looking to if there was any medical reason to explain somebody's criminal disposition.
Actually, didn't he used to talk about characteristics of people too? Like certain criminals had like different noses or eyes, and obviously it was all, it doesn't mean anything.
No, but it was the science that he was trying to establish.
Interesting, yeah.
I don't think there was anything about massive noses in there, though.
There wasn't a Cesar Lombroso's research, I remember, an Italian guy back in the day. But this is well before that, I think.
Oh, well before this. Okay, so the men crudely cut off George's skull cap in order to access the brain and gifted it to McGee's assistant, 15-year-old Lillian Heath.
What a delightful gift.
Now, Lillian went on to become the first female physician in Wyoming's history.
Ah.
She also kept George's skull cap and used it as an ashtray, So maybe don't go shouting a name from the rooftops quite so
I
loud.
thought you were going to say fizz like a cup or something. Stray's pretty hardcore.
Now, Heath and McGee are agreed to have been acting within the medical ethics of the time, and were quite satisfied with their findings that there was no discernible difference in George compared to anybody else, except for the massive cliff face of a nose that he had. Dr. Eugene Osborne, however, had some different plans. So, Linz, would you mind describing Dr. Eugene Osborne for me?
I would love to, Chris. Ooh. Look at what a dapper chap we have here. So, he's got some nice curly hair on top there. Two very defined curls in a row. He's looking off away from the camera. Another big mustache, not quite one solid caterpillar-like parrot, but a little gap in the middle. So, two caterpillars kissing, I guess. Dicky bow tie, smartly dressed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of very, very fancy. I'd
Very
probably
dapper
say.
down.
Yeah, and if you compare him with the image of George, yeah,
Yeah.
one of these
chalk
two
and
men,
cheese.
one of these two men has money.
Yeah, that's chalk and cheese. Yeah. Parrot's looking very dusty. Poor
Yes,
parrot.
yeah. John Eugene Osborne, Dr. John Eugene Osborne, kept George's body in a whiskey barrel filled with a salt solution for around a year while the good doctor got to work.
That's not creepy at all.
Oh, no. First, he created a death mask of George by applying plaster of Paris. And the death mask still exists today and shows a grisly picture of a man hanged, ears ripped off by the rope, and proving once and for all that he did have a big nose, hence the nickname.
Ay, ay, ay. Ears ripped off by the rope.
Yeah.
That detail was quite jarring.
They tried to do it 3 times.
Do you have a picture of the death mask?
I do. Here you go.
Oh. Okay, so... Oh, yeah. Yeah, the ears are gone. That's very strange to see. Like a human head with no ears on. But the nose from this angle, I don't know if this is damage from the fall or if this is what his nose looked like.
I think this is just his nose.
Yeah.
He's got a hook to the nose.
Yeah, it's a very unique nose. I don't think I've actually seen one like that before.
No.
It's sort of like, hooked and like a beak at the same time. Yeah, wow. Oh, quite sad to see him like that. But yeah, it gives you a much better view than the picture, which was quite bleached, should we say? So
Yeah.
couldn't really see his nose that much, but yeah. Oh.
Dr. Osborne next got to work flaying the deceased bandit.
Oh, Lord.
He removed the skin from George's thighs and chest and began taking measurements
Excuse me?
of himself.
Oh, gosh.
He bundled up the skin and sent it US Post first class to Denver, Colorado. Hello again, Colorado. We see you. With some very specific instructions for its reciprocant. A Denver tanner to turn George's skin into a medical bag and a lovely pair of shoes, which he specifically asked were to include George's nipples to eliminate any doubt when he told people that this was indeed a pair of shoes made of human skin.
What kind of a psychopath was this guy?
A big one.
Hello, could you please... This is just a package of human skin. I've been keeping in a barrel for a year. Now, could you make me a medical bag? You know, I'm a doctor. And also a pair of shoes with nipples on them, please. Just on the toes, you know. The points of the toes there.
Of course, sir. Any gloves?
So, where were the nipples to be placed? I'm guessing... I was thinking the points of...
Yeah, I'm hoping comically on the points of the shoes or on the heel.
Or where the Converse logo goes.
Oh. Now, at this moment, the tanner, of course, reported Osborne to the authorities.
Thank God, I was going to say, please tell me he did not go, well, very well, sir. Here's your nipple shoes.
Sorry, no, I read that wrong. No, what I meant was he made the bag and the shoes, but drew the line including the nipples, much to the doctor's chagrin. Dr. Osborne soon began wearing them proudly anyway, as he most gleefully continued his experiments on our man Parrot.
What on earth is wrong with this guy?
And when he was done with him, Dr. Osborne eventually buried George's bones and most of his skull in the yard behind Dr. McGee's office.
What on earth?
This dick. He performs these experiments for his own amusement, turns a man into a pair of shoes, and then thinks to bury the evidence in his co-worker's back garden, creating the perfect framing story if he ever needs it.
What a dick.
Who would do such a thing?
A dick. Who would do any of these things?
A man with bigger aspirations.
Oh, no.
Chapter 5. The Ambition. Perhaps tiring of a normal medical life, diagnosing coughs and syphilis, Dr. John Eugene Osborne had his sights set on politics. And in 1883, Dr. Death became an elected member of Wyoming's Territorial Assembly before eventually becoming mayor of Rawlins.
Oh, come on. The dead guy, shoe guy?
Well, of course, at this point, his unusual shoes were noticed and he was jailed. Now, by that, I mean in 1892, he was elected as governor of the entire state of Wyoming. And reportedly, he was wearing his man-flesh shoes during his inauguration ceremony. He continued in various roles in local government until he was selected by President Woodrow Wilson to become Assistant Secretary of State for the entire USA.
What the hell?
Forget Ed Gein. Leatherface has gone to Washington, baby.
Jesus Christ.
Now, these same shoes were reportedly worn throughout Osborne's 3 terms in the role, serving under 2 Secretary of States. He reportedly made no secret of the shoes, although due to the lack of nipplage on them, perhaps many did not believe. You do have to think, well, people did have different ideals and standards at the time. And also, the story would get out quite quickly now. But if it stayed amongst a certain circle, back then it was unlikely, unless you told a journalist, it probably wasn't getting out. But even then, he seemed to be very, very proud of these shoes.
Yeah, he never took them off.
No, but the fact that they were made out of a criminal was probably the thing, that saved him.
Yeah, he's like, look, we got him, boys.
Yeah. Now, Osborne lived out the rest of his life happily, taking local positions in Rawlins until he passed from complications of a heart attack at 84 in 1943.
Was he wearing the shoes when he was on his deathbed?
No, he didn't, actually. I know that. 1943. Think about that. It's
How old was he?
He was 84.
Damn.
So you think about this is the real tail end of the Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I think the Wild West has something that happened hundreds of years ago. But
yeah, it wasn't really, was it?
Wasn't really.
Yeah, America's not even that old.
No.
Yeah, you always forget that, don't you?
But the other thing that you've forgotten is that those bones still remained undisturbed in that backyard. By then, Osborne's behaviour, originally with the shoes, had kind of fallen into obscurity, and almost nobody remembered that big-nosed bandit lynched by an angry Rawlins mob. But in May 1950, construction workers were unearthing part of Cedar Street in Rawlins in preparation for a new department store when they came across a buried whiskey barrel. The workmen rejoiced, hoping to find a lovely aged bourbon. But instead, they came across a barrel of bones, including one very distinctive skull, sans one skull cap.
And the other doctor has the... Oh my gosh, talk about incriminating.
A large crowd gathered at the scene, and somebody remembered that the Dr. Lillian Heath, that female doctor, she claimed to have an ashtray made out of human bones. Maybe she knows something about this. So a presumably very awkward phone call was made to Heath, now a lady well into her 80s, who quickly had to clear 70 years of cigarette ash off some human remains and send her husband down to the scene with the bit.
No.
So they're
Gosh, it's just horrible.
So there, the officials took 2 pieces of the skull and combined them together again. And once again, Big-Nosed George Parrot was whole again. And you can see that picture in front of you now.
Oh, okay. We have a picture of 2 men in cowboy hats. Stetsons. And holding a skull in 2 pieces. And yeah, it's a perfect fit.
It's a perfect fit.
Oh my gosh. Wow, there he is. Mr. Parrot. Yeah, there he is.
Unfortunately, the power acquired by acquiring all of George's skull was just too great. So they were split up almost immediately. The Union Pacific Company took the skull cap, presumably as some kind of payment on the bounty, to place in their museum in Iowa, whereas the skull, death mask, and the shoes were sent up to Carbon County Museum in Rawlins, where you can still see them today. And that's where our listener Jonathan heard about this story.
Is Jonathan from there?
I believe he's from that area. He's certainly from Wyoming, but I'm not sure.
Oh, I wonder if you could snap us a picture of the shoes.
Oh, I've got one.
Oh, you do? Oh,
Oh.
okay.
So, well, actually, this is a good time to intervene. I was going to do this later, but as the story takes us, let's have a look at the shoes. And can you describe them for us?
I will do my very best. Oh, gosh. Not what I was expecting. Okay, so very strange colour choice.
Yeah, they're brown on the upper part, but the tip of it is white.
Cream or white, yeah.
Cream, yeah.
And they're kind of like very dainty looking.
Yeah.
Which, they got a little bit of a heel on them. They're brown. The lacing is very strange. Like they're just kind of snipped down the front, laced up, and the leather looks. Well, it might just be age, obviously, of course, but the leather looks very soft and worn. Like, he really got some use out of these bad boys. But looking at this and thinking that is made out of George Parrot is really... It's actually very horrific. Like, I think the white of the tip is a bit too close to sort of, like, Caucasian skin colour.
Yeah, it's a little bit off-putting, isn't it?
It's very off-putting. That's an ugly pair of shoes. I don't know if they were snazzy back in the day, but...
Look fancy to me.
Do you like them?
My fancy shoes.
My fancy shoes.
So studies have proven the skull and the skull cap are both George. And the shoes are made out of human skin, although researchers do have to be extremely careful with testing, as it could destroy the pieces. The medicine bag was never recovered, and it's rumoured that the rest of George's bones, which are not on display, were buried in a secret location. There was also reportedly a coin pouch made out of George's scrotum.
You are kidding.
Which was stolen by an employee of an unknown museum.
You've got to be kidding.
I'm not kidding at all.
What on earth are these people doing?
Keeping their money safe, Linz. Keeping their money safe. Now, something wasn't quite connecting in this story for me. I understood that he was turned into a pair of shoes. I understood this guy went on to have a political career. But that then these shoes end up on display in a museum. And I just wasn't sure how all of these things connected. Because Osborne was long past by the time of the discovery of the bones, by about better part of a decade. So how did it all connect? So I reached out to Ashley James, the registrar at the Carbon County Museum, Wyoming, to find out more.
Yes.
So, Linz, I'm just going to directly quote Ashley, just to make sure I don't misquote her or anything, because she's far more knowledgeable about this than I am. So, kindly read out her response to me.
Okay. So, she responded, "Hello, Chris. Thank you for contacting the Carbon County Museum, particularly when it comes to Parrot. We always appreciate when people reach out to us to make sure they're getting their facts right. To answer your questions, the museum received the shoes, as well as the death mask of Parrot, from the Rawlins National Bank, now operating as RNB State Bank, in 1982. The bank had been in possession of these items since the 1920s, when John Osborne was president of the bank and decided to put them on display."
So that's how they ended up at the museum. They were donated by the bank.
The bank?
Yeah, so he, after he left political office, he took up other roles. But I'll let Ashley answer this. So I asked her the question, did the bank know that these shoes were made of human flesh?
Oh yes, the bank was certainly aware. Osborne was definitely quite proud of them. I think it's worth pointing out that the successful part of his political career preceded his time at the bank. He was the governor of Wyoming in the 1890s and wasn't president of the bank until the 1920s. At that point, he was mainly a local figure, and everyone here already knew.
There you have it, really. I mean, she's kind of encapsulated it there, that it was, people knew about this.
Yeah.
And, they were displayed as a curiosity at the bank that he worked at. And I guess people just didn't think of it as odd at the time, or maybe they did, but there just wasn't anything reported about it. After his career, he returned back to Rollins, took up local positions of power. And remember, being a bank manager back then, you don't think much of it now, but it was...
I mean, you do.
You do, but it was extremely important back then.
Mm-hmm.
And he just decided to show off his shoes. Maybe that they weren't fit for wearing anymore. Or maybe his dogs were barking.
He was really proud of his dogs were barking. He was really proud of them.
He was really proud of those
Like,
shoes.
really proud. I mean, it's just such a strange thing. Like, I get it. Like, he's like, oh, look, I've got a pair of shoes made of the skin of a criminal. Okay, that's a very unique item. You could find that in Arnold's Cannibal Museum. Go back into the archives if you want to listen to that episode. But would you... I mean, everyone knew of these. It was like common knowledge. Oh yeah, the guy with the human skin shoes. Yeah. And people just went, oh yeah, that guy. As if it's just normal. I mean, was it normal?
I don't think it was ever normal, but you do have to remember different ideals at the time. And criminals were not treated with the same respect that they are now.
I mean, I do know this one story. It would never be enough for an episode, but there's one criminal, I don't recall his name right now as I speak, but he was illiterate. He got jailed for something, and it was for life, I think. So he got a prison guard to write his life story for him down by dictation. And when he died, his skin was used to bind this book about his life, and that's in a museum.
Oh.
And this might have been around the same time period, so yeah, you're right. I think it might be something in the way that criminals were treated, like.
Well, in the same way that human meat is forbidden food.
Maybe it's forbidden for you.
Well,
no, I'm kidding.
I'm chewing on my finger right now.
Ew, auto-cannibalism, that's called, It is.
Maybe as well, human leather, if you will, is the forbidden clothing item.
Well, I hope so.
Well, I wanted to ask actually just a little bit more. So I wanted to know what parrots meant to the museum, and this is how she responded.
In all honesty, Wyoming holds onto its history quite strongly, including the morbid bits. Many parts of the iconic Wild West narrative played out in Wyoming, and not all of it was palatable to modern sensibilities. When it comes to Perrott, Rollins does tend to lean on the notoriety of what happened as a unique draw for tourists. The museum has tried to take steps to de-emphasize Perrott, integrate his story into the larger history of the area, and cast more of a light on less macabre aspects of Carbon County's past. But every summer we get dozens of visitors who come into the museum solely to see the shoes. Whether we like it or not, they remain our most significant artifact.
So there you have it.
That's very interesting. It's really good that you contacted the museum curator? Or?
Yeah, she's she's the registrar of the museum, of the Carbon County Museum. She was incredibly helpful and incredibly quick at getting back to me as well. So there you have it. Make sure that if you're in the area, you visit the Carbon County Museum next time you're in Wyoming, and make sure that you tell the registrar, Ashley James, that Dystopian Simulation Radio sent you, and not just for the shoes. Now, Ashley asked for the link to this episode when it goes live, so can I just say to her again, thank you very much for your help, and let me know if you've got any corrections to my telling of the story.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful and really interesting.
So, Linz, what are your closing thoughts on this quite bizarre case of George the big-nosed, train-robbing, wheeling-dealing French pair of shoes?
Well, that's a lot to take in. There's a lot to unpack in this case. Let's just say that. But honestly, really interesting part of history of a very specific time and place. And a very strange man. Not Perrott. I mean...
No.
I'm talking about the doctor.
Yeah, I mean, this case takes a hard right
Yeah,
turn,
I
you
mean,
know?
a bandit, not the best person to exist, but easy to understand. You know, a lot of bandits, a lot of groups back then, as we learned. The guy with the shoes? What is that? What is that?
Yeah,
Why?
I mean, he seems like the villain of the piece, really, to me. I mean, he's
a very strange man who definitely tried to incriminate, I'm going to say allegedly, but it seemed like he tried to allegedly incriminate his co-worker there.
Yeah.
I would not be happy. And
No.
I don't know why he wanted to do these things. I don't know why.
a morbid curiosity is all I can...
A morbid curiosity is being interested in something. Making shoes out of a human skin to parade them around town is something else.
It is.
It's like wearing the skin or the bones of your enemies and going like, ah.
I know, I mean, it seems like if he'd stayed in Rawlins or somewhere out the west his whole life and was this sort of local deputy or to sheriff or something like that, I can see it. But it's the fact that he rose to political, you know, to be one of the most important people in the United States for a period of time. Certainly, at the very least, the most important person in the state of Wyoming.
Well, I suppose politicians aren't historically great people.
No, that is true.
So there's probably some out there who've done way worse than...
Yeah, to be fair.
Unfortunately.
When you frame it that way, he's probably an alright guy.
He's just a normal politician, you know, wearing the skin of dead men, not caring about poor people in towers and such. Just a standard politician. Who needs them?
Just your average Tory.
Yep.
Right. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening to Dystopian Simulation Radio. Don't forget that you can see all of the images for today's episode over on our Instagram at
d.s.radio.
And if you're feeling especially friendly,
Yeah.
we'll go with friendly, then you can sign up to our Patreon over at
patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio.
and help fund our trip to the Carbon County Museum.
Yeehaw!
Bye!
Bye!
Big Nose leapt into action and using his Shaka Khan.
Sha-la-la-la-la.